"Here," Daniel Wexler said with the breezy generosity of a man who'd never once questioned his own place at the top. "Why don't you play some games on this while your dad finishes up?" It wasn't a gift just a loan, like a scepter passed from king to commoner, but his tone implied the little girl should be grateful. Amara took the tablet slowly. Her small fingers didn't tremble, though every muscle in her father's jaw tightened. Behind them, the California sun poured down over the Wexler estate's sprawling gardens, where Thomas Brooks had been trimming rose bushes for the past 2 hours. The shears in his hand glinted like a warning. Daniel didn't notice. He never noticed. He was too busy glancing over Amara's head toward the infinity pool where two venture capitalists sipped mimosas, their conversation a low hum about Series B funding and market dominance. "Go on," Daniel urged. "There's a drawing app in there somewhere. Or maybe some puzzles." He said puzzles the way some people said vegetables, good for the brain, but nothing to get excited about. Amara's lips curved into something that looked like a smile, but wasn't. "Okay," she said softly. Thomas kept his eyes down. He'd learned a long time ago that white men like Daniel preferred black workers who blended into the scenery. He could feel the tension humming inside him, the same tension that had been building for years. It wasn't about a tablet. It was about the way Daniel had glanced at his daughter like she was something fragile and unformed, a blank slate waiting for permission to matter. But Amara wasn't blank. Not even close. Her bedroom at home was a fortress of ideas. Sticky notes covered the walls with algorithm sketches, Python snippets, and game design concepts. She'd been writing code since she was 9, the first time she stumbled onto an online tutorial while using a second-hand laptop her dad rescued from a junk pile. That summer, she built her first game, a simple platformer starring a gardener who battled corporate robots to save a forest. She never told Daniel Wexler any of this, of course. Now, standing in the shimmering shadow of his wealth, Amara tapped the tablet screen. The glossy icons reflected in her dark, steady eyes. "Just don't drop it," Daniel added with a chuckle, already turning away. The air smelled of freshly cut grass, and something sharper, maybe the faint tang of resentment. Thomas returned to pruning, his muscles moving in disciplined rhythm, but his ears stayed tuned to the small sounds his daughter made. Taps, swipes, the soft clack of virtual keys. It wasn't the rhythm of someone playing a game. "Careful with that," one of the venture capitalists called lazily from the poolside. "Those things cost more than a used car." Amara didn't look up. Instead, she opened the tablet's basic coding app one Daniel had probably downloaded for his own son and then forgotten about when the boy lost interest. The interface was clunky, limited, but it was still a tool. And Amara had never met a tool she couldn't bend to her will. Within minutes, she'd bypassed the tutorial and started drafting a short script, nothing elaborate, just enough to make the device do something it wasn't designed to do. She built a small animation, a dancing garden sprite that moved in time with the snip-snip of her father's shears. The sprite wore overalls and carried a bouquet of roses. "What you working on, kiddo?" The voice belonged to Evan, Daniel's head of engineering. He'd wandered out from the kitchen, holding an iced coffee. His tone was casual, but there was a faint note of curiosity. "A game," Amara said without looking up. Evan peered over her shoulder, and for a moment, his eyebrows twitched upward. The code was clean, elegant, and this wasn't some prefab block coding nonsense. She was working in JavaScript. "You learned that from school?" he asked. "No," Amara replied, fingers still moving. "I learned it from the internet." Evan laughed. "Well, good for you." But something in his laugh wasn't dismissive, it was unsettled. Across the garden, Daniel noticed Evan lingering. "She bothering you?" he called, as though the very presence of a gardener's kid in his backyard might be a nuisance. Evan hesitated. "Not at all. She's just keeping busy," Daniel interrupted, striding over. "Don't worry, I'm not running a daycare." Amara's code compiled with a soft chime. On the screen, the garden sprite began to move, snipping roses and planting seeds that bloomed instantly into shimmering, pixel-perfect flowers. She'd even added a little loop of music, faint, cheerful, and entirely original. Evan blinked. "That's impressive." Daniel leaned down and glanced at the tablet. His reaction was instant, the faint furrow of a brow, the quick calculation of what he was looking at, and then the reflexive smirk. "Cute," he said. "Very creative." But in the space between his words, Amara saw at the part of him that didn't quite believe what he'd just witnessed. Thomas's shears stopped mid-snip. He was watching, waiting. And though Amara didn't say it aloud, she was thinking, "You have no idea what I can do." Daniel straightened up, brushing invisible dust off his immaculate suit jacket. "Well, that's enough screen time for now. Don't want to fry your brain." He reached for the tablet, but Amara's fingers tightened around it just slightly, not enough to seem defiant, but enough to make him pause for a fraction of a second. She looked up at him, her expression neutral. "Can I finish the level first?" she asked politely. Evan glanced at Daniel, then back at the tablet. "Actually," he said slowly, "this isn't a level. She's building. Well, it looks like a small interactive garden simulation. But she's doing it manually, not with drag and drop." Daniel tilted his head, half amused, half annoyed. "Interactive garden simulation? Is that supposed to be impressive?" Evan's voice was steady, but his eyes were sharp. "It's not something I'd expect a kid her age to whip up in 20 minutes on a lockdown corporate tablet." That got Daniel's attention, and not in the warm, "Oh wow, how amazing" way. More like the way a CEO reacts when someone tells him a security vulnerability just got exposed at a board meeting. "Lockdown," Daniel repeated, frowning slightly. "Yeah," Evans said, glancing at Amara with something close to admiration. "These tablets aren't configured for coding. They're preloaded with approved educational and entertainment apps, but she's clearly bypassed that." Daniel's lips thinned. "And you're saying my gardener's kid hacked one of my company's devices?" The words landed heavy in the garden air. Thomas straightened, his grip on the shears tightening just enough to make the metal groan faintly. "Sir," he said carefully, "she's not hacking anything. She's just smart." "Dad," Amara said softly, without looking up, "I didn't break anything. I just opened a shell window through the educational IDE and rewrote some scripts. It's basic." Evan let out a low whistle. "Basic for you, maybe." Daniel chuckled a short, sharp sound. "Well, congratulations. You've got a future in whatever this is." His tone made it sound like a hobby, something you eventually outgrow. "But let's not mess with company property, okay?" "Sure," Amara said, but her fingers didn't slow. The sprite on the screen now followed player-drawn paths, planting flowers along the way. The flowers weren't random, they bloomed in the shapes of Fibonacci spirals. Evan crouched down next to her, captivated despite himself. "Wait, you're using procedural generation?" "Yeah," Amara said matter-of-factly. "It's faster than manually placing every sprite, and it looks more natural." Thomas watched in silence, his heart swelling with something complicated pride. Yes, but also the ache of knowing his daughter's brilliance existed in a world that might never fully value it. Daniel, on the other hand, looked restless. He'd built an empire on tech innovation, but his ego had always relied on the idea that he and men like him were the gatekeepers of genius. From the patio, one of the venture capitalists called out, "Hey Wexler, is this the kid prodigy you've been hiding from us?" The tone was joking, but the words hit their mark. Daniel plastered on a smile. "Just a curious little coder," he said. "Show us, then," the other VC shouted. "Let's see what she's got." Daniel hesitated, not because he thought Amara would embarrass herself, but because he couldn't decide whether her talent made him look generous or threatened. Evan, sensing the moment, spoke up. "Actually, I think you'll want to see this." "She's fine," Daniel cut in. "Bring it over." The group gathered under the patio awning, the sun slanting in golden rays across the glass-topped table. Amara walked up, the tablet tucked under her arm like she'd been doing this her whole life. She placed it on the table and tapped the screen. The garden simulation filled the display, lush and colorful, each element responsive to touch. She demonstrated drawing a curved path. The sprite walked it smoothly, planting flowers that burst into intricate fractals. "That's surprisingly elegant," one VC murmured. "How long did that take you?" the other asked. "About 20 minutes, Amara said. A beat of silence. 20 minutes. Evan grinned. "I told you." Daniel forced a laugh. "Well, clearly we've got a future employee here. Maybe one day you'll intern at Wexler Systems." But the VCs weren't looking at Daniel anymore. They were watching Amara with a kind of speculative interest usually reserved for disruptive startups. "What else can it do?" one asked. Amara hesitated, then looked at her dad. Thomas gave her a small nod, the kind that said, "I trust you, but be careful." She tapped a hidden menu. The garden shifted into nighttime mode, the flowers glowing softly in patterns that formed constellations when viewed from above. As the sprite walked, it left a trail of bioluminescent seeds that sprouted into new constellations. "That's beautiful," the first VC said quietly. For a moment, Daniel's jaw tightened. This was supposed to be a light distraction, a child amusing herself while the adults talked business. Now it was the business. He stepped forward, reclaiming control. "You know, this is exactly the kind of creativity we foster at Wexler Systems. It's all about nurturing talent wherever you find it." The words sounded good, but they rang hollow to Thomas, who'd seen Daniel barely acknowledge his crew for years. Evan crossed his arms. "Funny," he said. "I've been telling you we need to diversify our junior dev program. You kept saying talent's rare. Looks like it's been pruning your rose bushes all along." The VCs chuckled. Daniel's smile didn't reach his eyes. Amara, oblivious to the political undercurrents, was already tweaking the simulation, adding weather effects. Rain fell across the garden, pooling in low areas and nourishing the plants dynamically. "How'd you learn to do all this?" one VC asked. Amara shrugged. "I read a lot. Watched tutorials. Tried stuff. If it broke, I fixed it." Evan's gaze flicked to Daniel. "Sounds like the kind of problem-solving we could use." Daniel's fingers tapped lightly against his glass. He hated losing control of a conversation, especially to someone who wasn't even supposed to be part of it. As the group dispersed, Daniel pulled Thomas aside. "She's talented," he said in a low voice. "But you should be careful. If she gets too deep into this stuff without the right guidance, she could burn out. Or worse, get into trouble." Thomas met his eyes. "You mean trouble like proving she's smarter than the people you pay 6 figures?" Daniel's smile hardened. "I mean trouble like wasting potential because no one taught her how the real world works." Thomas didn't reply. He just glanced at Amara, who was now showing Evan how she'd structured her code to make debugging easier. Back in the garden, Amara returned the tablet reluctantly. Daniel took it with a measured nod. "Interesting afternoon," he said. "Maybe we'll talk again." But as he walked away, Thomas recognized that tone the one rich men used when they'd seen something they didn't expect, and weren't sure yet whether to embrace it or erase it. And for the first time, Thomas thought, maybe my daughter doesn't need his permission. 3 days later, Thomas was back at the Wexler estate, trimming the hedges along the east wall. The morning sun reflected off the glass facade of the mansion, but the usual hum of sprinklers and hedge clippers was broken by the sound of voices. Daniel's, sharp and brisk, and Evan's, lower but insistent. They were walking the length of the patio, coffee cups in hand. "I'm telling you," Evan said, "what she did wasn't luck. She's working with concepts my junior engineers still stumble over. She's exceptional." Daniel sighed, as though Evan had been repeating himself for days. "Evan, she's 12. She built a cute garden game, sure. That doesn't mean she's the next Zuckerberg. It means she's got raw ability, and raw ability is rare. If we don't what? Pluck her out of her little world and drop her into ours. You think her dad's gonna sign off on that?" Thomas froze mid-snip. Evan didn't back down. "I think if you can't see what's right in front of you, someone else will. She doesn't need Wexler Systems. Wexler Systems might need her." Daniel chuckled, a cold little sound. "Don't be dramatic." That night, Thomas brought it up at dinner. Their small kitchen smelled faintly of fried chicken and rosemary. "Amara," he said between bites, "what would you think if someone from Wexler's company asked you to come by? You know, see their offices, meet some of the engineers." Amara's fork paused midair. "Like a field trip." Thomas hesitated. "More like, they want to see what you can do." Amara's eyes lit up, then dimmed slightly. "And by they, you mean Daniel?" He nodded. She set down her fork. "Is this because of the garden game?" "Partly." Amara leaned back in her chair, thinking, "Dad, if I go, I'm not going to be their cute kid project." Thomas gave a slow smile. "That's my girl." 2 days later, Evan himself showed up in a company Tesla, wearing jeans instead of his usual button-down. "Morning," he greeted Thomas, then turned to Amara. "You ready to see where we make the magic happen?" The Wexler Systems headquarters was a cathedral of glass and steel, every surface gleaming with the kind of expensive minimalism that screamed money. Inside, employees zipped around on scooters, screens displayed real-time analytics, and the smell of artisanal coffee floated from an open cafe. Amara kept her face neutral, But her eyes missed nothing: the security badges, the server rooms, the half-finished prototypes on people's desks. Evan led her to a small glass-walled conference room. "We set up a workstation for you," he said, gesturing to a sleek laptop and a large monitor. "No pressure, just see what you can do with this sandbox environment." Daniel appeared a few minutes later, smiling like a man about to entertain guests. "So this is our young genius." Amara looked up from the keyboard. "Hi. Don't be nervous," Daniel said, though she clearly wasn't. "We just want to see you have fun." She nodded, already scanning through the dev tools installed on the machine. They'd given her a preloaded dataset: weather patterns, plant growth algorithms, and a simple API for generating terrain. Within 15 minutes, she'd built a dynamic ecosystem that responded to temperature changes in real time. A shift from 72 degrees Fahrenheit to 85 degrees Fahrenheit caused the virtual plants to wilt, triggering bees to relocate to shaded areas. A small crowd gathered outside the glass walls, murmuring. One engineer whispered, "That took our team a week last quarter." Daniel stepped inside, his hands clasped behind his back. "Interesting," he said, as if commenting on a child's finger painting. "But can it scale?" Amara swiveled in her chair to face him. "Yes. The code's modular. You can expand the dataset without rewriting the core functions." "Want me to show you?" Evan grinned. "Please do." She did, and in less than 10 minutes, she'd integrated real-time satellite weather data into the simulation. The entire virtual world shifted as a storm pattern moved across the Pacific. The crowd outside clapped. Daniel didn't. Afterward, Daniel pulled Evan aside. "She's good," he admitted. "But we have to think about optics. A black kid suddenly working in-house. People will think it's a PR stunt." Evan's voice was flat. "Maybe it wouldn't be a stunt if you actually invested in her talent instead of worrying how it looks." Daniel's jaw tightened. "You want me to hand her a company laptop and let her run wild?" "She's not ready." Evan raised an eyebrow. "Or maybe you're not ready." Back at home, Amara sat cross-legged on her bed, the hum of her old rescued laptop filling the room. She'd copied some of her sandbox work into her own environment, expanding it far beyond what Wexler Systems had shown her. Her version didn't just simulate gardens, it simulated entire biospheres, predicting how species would adapt over decades. She was already imagining ways to apply it to urban planning, farming, even climate change models. Thomas knocked gently and stepped in. "How was it?" She shrugged. "The place is cool. But Daniel, he looks at me like I'm a puzzle he didn't ask for." Thomas chuckled grimly. "That's because you are." The next morning, an email arrived from Evan. "Amara, I know you're busy with school, but there's a hackathon this weekend. No age limit. Prize money's small, but the judges are big names. Interested?" Amara's reply was one word: yes. The hackathon was held in a sprawling co-working space downtown. Rows of tables buzzed with laptops, coffee cups, and frantic typing. Most competitors were college students or young professionals. A few glanced curiously at the skinny black girl in a yellow hoodie, setting up her station beside a bearded man with 3 monitors. The challenge: build something that solves a real-world problem in 24 hours. Amara didn't hesitate. She built a tool that took live traffic data, predicted congestion patterns, and suggested micro-changes in traffic light timing to reduce emissions and travel time. By hour 12, her model was outperforming the city's existing system in simulation. Halfway through, she noticed Daniel standing near the entrance, arms crossed. He hadn't announced himself, just watched. When judging time came, Amara presented calmly, her voice steady as she explained the algorithms and demonstrated the results. One judge, a CTO from a major logistics firm, leaned forward. "You built this alone?" "Yes." "Would you consider licensing it?" Daniel's head snapped toward the judge, but Amara didn't look at him. "Maybe. I'd want it to stay open source." The room went quiet. She didn't win first place, she won 2 special awards for innovation and social impact. A local tech blog snapped a photo of her holding both trophies, Thomas standing proudly behind her. By the time they got home, the article was already circulating. 12-year-old black girl outsmarts Silicon Valley engineers at hackathon. The next day, Daniel called Thomas. His voice was smooth, but there was an edge beneath it. "We should talk," he said, "about Amara's future." Thomas's answer was simple. "We'll let you know if we need your help." Daniel didn't like that answer at all. Daniel didn't wait long before making his move. 2 days after the hackathon, a glossy Wexler Systems envelope appeared in Thomas's mailbox. Inside was an official invitation for Amara to join the company's Young Innovators program, a special mentorship track that promised resources, guidance, and exclusive opportunities in exchange for a non-disclosure agreement and intellectual property rights to any work she developed under their umbrella. Thomas read the document twice, his jaw tightening with each page. It sounded generous on paper. It was a trap in reality. When Amara came home from school, he handed her the packet. "Tell me what you see." She flipped through it, eyes narrowing. "They want my code. All of it. Even stuff I make on my own time." "That's what I saw, too," Thomas said. She tossed the papers onto the table. "Then it's a no." That night, Daniel called directly. "Thomas, I think you're misunderstanding." "No," Thomas interrupted. "I understand perfectly. You want to put my daughter's brain in a box you own." "This is an opportunity," Daniel said, his voice tightening. "We can open doors for her she can't even imagine yet. With locks on them." Thomas shot back. "No deal." Daniel paused, then tried a different angle. "If she's as good as you think she is, she'll need protection. The world isn't kind to people without the right connections." Thomas's voice went low. "The world's not kind to her because of people who think like you." And he hung up. Word spread fast after that, not because Thomas or Amara said anything, but because someone inside Wexler Systems leaked the offer. Tech blogs latched onto the story. Billionaire CEO tries to lock down 12-year-old coding prodigy's work, father says no. The comments section split down predictable lines. Some accused Thomas of being foolish, of throwing away his daughter's big break. Others called Daniel a vulture. Through it all, Amara stayed quiet. She worked on her biosphere simulation, refining the algorithms late into the night. 1 week later, Evan called. "There's a City Tech Expo coming up," he said. "They've got a panel on youth innovation. I can get Amara a slot. No strings attached." Thomas hesitated. "You sure about that?" "Positive. And Daniel won't be speaking. He wasn't invited this year." Amara agreed without hesitation. The expo's main hall was packed, rows of booths, giant LED screens, the hum of 100 overlapping conversations. The Youth Innovation panel was slotted for the afternoon, and by the time Amara walked on stage, the audience had swelled. She wore her yellow hoodie, the same one from the hackathon. No corporate logos. No scripted PR talking points. Her presentation wasn't flashy. She explained her biosphere simulation clearly, showing how it could help city planners adapt to climate change and protect food security. She talked about her process, about breaking things on purpose just to learn how to fix them. And then she said something that made the room go quiet. People think coding is about writing instructions for machines. But really, it's about asking the right questions. I'm 12. I don't have all the answers. But I know the questions I want to ask. And I don't need anyone's permission to ask them. The crowd erupted in applause. Near the back of the hall, Daniel had slipped in unnoticed. He watched, arms folded, his expression unreadable. When the applause died down, a reporter raised her hand. "Amara, do you see yourself working for a big tech company someday?" Amara smiled. "Maybe. Or maybe I'll build something they have to work for." Laughter and clapping rolled through the hall. After the panel, as Amara stepped down from the stage, she saw Daniel waiting. For a second, she braced herself. But he didn't launch into a pitch. "That was impressive," he said. "Thanks," she replied. He glanced at Thomas, then back at her. "If you ever want access to resources on your own terms, my door's open." It wasn't an apology, but it was closer to respect than she'd ever seen from him. Weeks passed. The story about the tablet and the gardener's daughter became a kind of tech industry parable, retold at conferences and over coffee. Some twisted it into a tale of lost opportunity. Others saw it for what it was, a reminder that genius can bloom anywhere, even where the gatekeepers aren't looking. Amara didn't chase the attention. She kept building. She shared her code online, open source, collaborating with strangers from across the globe. Her biosphere simulation evolved into a living, breathing digital world used by educators, scientists, and game designers. One evening, Thomas stood in her doorway, watching her work. "You know," he said softly, "when you were little, you used to take apart your toys just to see how they worked. I worried you'd never put anything back together." Amara grinned without looking up. "Guess I proved you wrong." He stepped into the room, resting a hand on her shoulder. You proved a lot of people wrong. Months later, Amara received an email from a professor at MIT. They'd been following her work and wanted her to come speak to a group of graduate students. Not as a novelty, as a peer. She accepted. On the flight to Boston, she opened her laptop and began a new project. This one wasn't about gardens or traffic or even climate change. It was about Connection, a platform where kids like her could learn, share, and create without waiting for anyone to hand them a tablet and tell them to play. Somewhere over the clouds, she smiled to herself. Because now, she wasn't just playing. She was building the rules of the game. And this time, everyone else would have to catch up. Thank you for listening. If you find it interesting, please like and subscribe to follow the next stories.